Good afternoon, evening, morning, everybody. Lovely to see you. So um, today we've reached COZ number 44, and this is about composers from the Warsaw Ghetto. And we're very pleased to welcome today Stephen Muir and Teryl Dobbs. Stephen, as you may know, was the principal investigator of an amazing project called Performing the Jewish Archive, which ran for 3 years across the world. And Terrell was one of his main collaborators. There were festivals and conferences in Madison, in Sydney, in Cape Town, where you'll tell us where else. And part of this was because Steve was in Cape Town and he was hunting in the archives of one of the synagogues there and came across some amazing music, which I'm sure they're going to tell us about. So if I can hand over to you, Terrell, who are chair of music education at the Mead Witter School of Music, University of Wisconsin-Madison. Over to you, Terrell.
Thank you so much, Geraldine, for the invitation, and thank you so much, Steve, for agreeing to do this with me. And welcome, everybody. I so appreciate all of you spending
I
this
wouldn't
time.
have missed it for anything.
Oh, so good. So before we get started, it's here in the U.S. This is a very different day for us. It is the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. And so we have a number of remembrances. And so one of the things I think that connects us here today with music of the Holocaust and this very, very sad anniversary is that it allows us to pause to remember and acknowledge that there's much more work to be done for justice. We're still trying to work for justice for those we lost, the 6 million we lost over 80 years ago in the Shoah. So I hope we can acknowledge and support each other, and thank you for this. So we come together in this day, in this space. So with that said, my colleague today, my conversation partner, is the eponymous Steve Muir. And Steve, we met 7 years ago, right?
True.
We met at the conference that you were holding, and that was the Music, Memory, and Migration conference. Yeah. And that's where also I met David Fleeg, Lisa Peschel, and all of these folks that got together and under Steve's leadership and with all of us kind of nudging him from all kinds of different angles, started working with a Performing the Jewish Archive project, which, Steve, I have to say, and thank you again from the bottom of my heart, that this project has been transformative in my work. And not only working with the music and everybody that we encountered, but it has really framed my research agenda since that time. And so I owe a huge debt of gratitude to you. So, and you've been you've been really working a lot with Gall's music, and you've also got this amazing resource online about journeys in Jewish choral music. So tell me about that.
Thank you very much for a very kind introduction. And likewise, you've been a great support and inspiration to me. And yeah, it was a very happy meeting those 7 years ago. I think there was a pub involved as well, but yeah.
A couple.
Ah, yes. Yeah. It might even be the conference before that, Alex, which is called Continuities and Ruptures.
Yeah.
but we also met at that one as well that you held the program up for. Anyway, what was the question? Yes, Journeys in Jewish Chorus Music. Yes, so many of you will have heard some of this before, but there are some interesting, maybe new bits and pieces that I've been thinking about, and it was back in 2012 that I came across these resources that Geraldine mentioned as well. And in fact, the project I went to Cape Town for was a little bit different. I was interested in choirs. I was interested in ethnography of choirs, maybe even a little bit of music psychology type thing. Why do people sing in choirs? What's different about synagogue choirs? What's different about South African synagogue choirs? And all those sorts of things. What makes them tick and function as they do? And that research was interesting, but it wasn't actually as fruitful as I was hoping. But on the last day of my visit in 2012, or the day before I flew back to England, a Rabbi Stuart Salvator, who's a sort of freelance cantor and rabbi in Cape Town, I phoned him up because he had some books for sale, actually, and I wanted to see what he had. He said, "Oh, I must introduce you to Mrs. Brodie," and so he introduced me to Mrs. Brodie. But this was the evening before I left, and there were she brought this carrier bag, literally a shopping bag, of papers, and they were kind of flying over the hotel garden. We were desperately trying to catch them all, which we did, thank heavens. It turns out that they were the papers of her grandfather, Cantor Florim Spector, and amongst, to cut a long story short, amongst the papers was a piece by David Eisenstadt, composer, very important composer between the wars in Warsaw, but also of some fame for his work trying to keep music and activities going in the ghetto years. After some consultation with people like Brett Werb, whom we probably all know, it turned out that this was, quite a significant discovery. I'll call it a rediscovery, and from that came a number of other connections with other cantors who had travelled to South Africa, people like, and their names will now go straight out of my head, of course, which they have, but I'll come back to that. There's Spector, there's not Eisenstadt, of course, and anyway, to cut another long story short, tragically Eisenstadt and his family were murdered, probably getting onto the train to Treblinka, and along with his daughter and his wife, they were shot. And there's a remarkable woman in Cape Town called Miriam Lichterman, who has two sons who are cantors in the States now, and she remembers Eisenstadt as a child, when she was a child in Warsaw. And she has kind of confirmed this story from as much as she knows as well. So anyway, so with the material that I found in Cape Town, there was, again, lots of other connections, lots of other manuscripts came to light over 3 or 4 years, but only this one by Eisenstadt, unfortunately. And it's a wonderful, wonderful piece. But there were since then I've sort of gone on a little bit of a journey of discovery about Eisenstadt. There's not a huge amount about him, unfortunately, but I have unearthed a few other pieces. Well, it's not that I've discovered them, but I've located them elsewhere. So I mean that's the start of that story, Terry. So
yeah. We've got some photos. So why don't I share the screen and then we can talk about them because there we go. And so on the right, on the right is Cantor Eisenstadt, and on the left is Maricia, his daughter. And Steve, she was known as the Nightingale of the Ghetto, right?
Yeah. So she was a sorry, carry on.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, no, she was a singer of some repute, and Eisenstadt. He wasn't a cantor actually. He was just he was the choir master, and also an orchestral conductor and all sorts. But yes, Marisa was a remarkable singer by all accounts. Performed extensively in the Ghetto, and she's the daughter that I mentioned that unfortunately was shot.
Right. You've
found some connections, haven't you?
Yes, we have. And one of the things I read about Maricia, she was so popular because she was also singing in some of the cafes, just trying to support her family. And the vocal load on her was so extensive that she would often sing until she was hoarse. So it just speaks to how popular she was in the Ghetto. Here's a couple other photos that Steve just sent to me. Steve, can you talk about those, please?
Yeah, so these are Eisenstadt was the choir master at the Great Synagogue on Tomacka Street in Warsaw, and it had a choir of great repute, as you may know, purportedly 80 boys and 30 men, things we can only dream of these days. But that's, can you see my mouse? You probably can't, can you?
No.
No, okay. But Eisenstadt is the conductor. So on the left, there's him conducting sort of in front of a harmonium, and you see all the boys gathered around and a few men at the background as well. And I think that might be Gershon Sirota next to him. I can't quite see. And then on the other one, Eisenstadt is again conducting a rehearsal. So I forgot to send you the sources of these photos, but I'll check those out and make sure that they're there. But those are, and the photo that you showed before, which is that one. Those are the only three photos that I know of. There is also a possible very kind of half a second sighting of him in one of the early Yiddish films, On a Heim, Without a Home, and we think that it's his choir singing on that film as well, but it's a bit unclear, and it's a very brief encounter, should we say?
Wow,
I'll say more about some of the other sources.
Oh, terrific! And what about this program, Steve?
So yeah, this was a sort of one of the gifts of Brett Werb. We spoke about this subject a lot when I came back from South Africa, and a few months later, as Brett does, he came up with something, and he said, by the way, I found this program from 1931, 8th of March 1931, from the Great Synagogue on Tomacka Street, of a concert in which and it was a very grand concert by the looks of the program. There's 15 items on the program, and orchestra and soloists and things. And the end of the first half was Chad Gadya, which is the piece I found in this folder of stuff in Cape Town. And there is the front page of it, title page. Some interesting things. It's written partly in German, so Cantata für Chor, Chad Gadya, die Eisenstadt. That's obviously a Germanization of his Polish name. But then also in Cyrillic, it says Cantata degli Achore a cappella Skazka a Kaziol, which is cantata for choir a cappella, The Tale of the Goat. So and then a long letter in Yiddish from Eisenstadt to Spector, the cantor from Rostov-on-Don, who ended up in Cape Town with this manuscript, basically saying, "Dear Mr. Spector, I respect you more than anyone else. Please give me your opinion." But also a couple of slightly mystical, no, that's not the word. What's the word? Slightly enigmatic inscriptions on the bottom right. There's one in Polish, which is purportedly the words of Witold Maliszewski, saying this is a great piece. Maliszewski was the founder of the Odessa Conservatoire, I think, if I remember rightly. And then underneath that, there's another inscription in Cyrillic, although actually quite childish Cyrillic. It's certainly not the writing of the composer that it says it is, because it says this is one of the best examples of the Hebrew style, signed Alexander Glazunov. And that's quite a big character to be getting the opinion of. So there are chains of connection. Maliszewski studied in St. Petersburg with Rimsky-Korsakov and Glazunov, and so there are sort of connections up the stream, as it were. But there's no. That's definitely not Glazunov's writing.
Wow.
So and that's probably not Maliszewski's writing either. So anyway, yeah.
Wonderful.
Some really interesting stuff.
Wonderful. Well, I just have to interject just a bit and welcome the family of Yosemite Feldschuh, who have come in from New York. Yole, Yurina. Hello. And Sharon Ben-Shem da Silva, Laila Tov from welcome. So good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to see you too.
And,
so nice to see you.
Oh, so glad to have you here. So Steve and I, Brett Werb, actually it's interesting because it's kind of a two-way shidduch, because Steve got me connected with this and encouraged me to, okay, Terry, there's got to be something out there to find. I was working with the Holocaust Museum in DC with the with Holocaust education and higher education, for teacher education. And I was asked to serve at a summit meeting. And so I had met Brett personally at the conference in Leeds, and also musicologists here at University of Wisconsin-Madison know Brett. And so we had gotten together, and so I had an appointment to visit him. And so I went to his office, and he said, Terry, I've got to show you something. And so he had up on his screen a manuscript from a little girl by the name of Yosemite Feldschuh in Warsaw. And I'll show you in just a minute. And he said, I can't get anybody to perform this. And I talked, and I said, not a problem, because I knew that with Steve's ethos of this project, that it would be perfect. It would be absolutely perfect. So I'm going to share screen of that amazing artifact. And so we have, this is the notebook of Yosemite Feldschuh. And you see her handwriting, Warsaw, 1940, she composed it. And so this is where Steve and I and our work connect, and it's through this music performance, music as learning, through Eisenstadt as a pedagogue, Yosemite as a composer performer. And Steve, we believe that Yosemite's father and Eisenstadt most likely had a connection, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, given the circles they moved in and the places that Eisenstadt and Marisa, his daughter, performed, as you say, the cafes and some of the theatres. So yeah, I can't imagine they didn't really.
Right.
Such a small,
Right. And so
febrile atmosphere.
Brett's concern was, he had spoken to people and that, because it's composed by a young child, this is, there's this judgment of value. But once I got into this, and you see there are 17 pieces, a sonata, some of them are not finished, but she's very meticulous. And so I'm going to show you her manuscript. This is the Nocturne, and it is unfinished, but you can see that it's very carefully inscribed. And so this entire notebook was found, was living it still lives in the Rachel Auerbach collection at Yad Vashem. And Rachel Auerbach was a cousin of Yosima's father, Reuven ben Shem Feldshuh. And Ben Shem was Feldshuh's nom de plume. He was a prolific writer. So, and then I must show you, this is thanks to Sharon, her father, and Yoli, their family. This is Yosima's picture from their family archive. And I'm so grateful. You can see, just how full of life she was. And from the family archive, again, whoops, wrong one, is a poster, an extant poster printed in the Warsaw Ghetto of her concert. And she had her debut on the playing the Mozart concerto with the Jewish Symphony Orchestra under the baton of Adam Furmansky. And that was, I believe, March 15th, 1951. So here she is at the piano practicing. And then it was, I believe, at the Melody Theater. There's an old photograph on the right in the Ghetto. And it was very interesting that her also is very fascinating. And Sharon and Yoli jump in here. Yosima's father left an 800-page diary written in Micro-Hebrew that is still waiting to be translated. And so he has daily entries, and so of what was going on in the ghetto in real time. And one of his important contributions to my work, and for which I am hugely grateful, is his description of how Yosima came to the attention of the musicians in the ghetto. And it was at a salon evening, and she was brought along and listened, and she had been asked, "Oh, little one, what do you think of this performance?" And so, bright little pip that she was, she said exactly what she thought. She pointed out the errors, how it can be improved. And so the artist, this adult, said, "Well, okay, if you're so good, you go ahead and play it." And she did. And so she was immediately taken under the wing of some pedagogues in the ghetto. And they said, you know, the ghetto must hear her. And so this was a tough decision, from what I understand in the diary, with her parents, because her mother, Perla, was a musicologist and a piano. My sense is that Perla was probably Yosima's first teacher. She knew exactly the type of work that this was going to take and what they needed to do to support her. And that meant, can we have enough food so that she has the caloric energy to do this? And so they worked incredibly hard, a lot of thinking going into this. And so she had her debut. It was a triumph for her. There was I came across an article, a review of her performance, and the Gazeta Warsaw. Excuse me for my horrible Polish, and this was, of course, the newspaper that was condoned, you know, by it was the Nazi-approved ghetto newspaper. But they praised Yosima's performance, but they criticized Formansky, asking, please, can we not have any more saxophones covering those parts? So that's one of the things I remember about that. So I'll stop that for a moment. So I'm studying. So Sharon and Yoli, is that reasonably accurate?
Oh, so am I being heard?
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Yes. Okay. Hi, everyone. Very excited to be here. Yes, Terry, you told the story well. We do know that Perla was her first teacher.
Good.
Definitely. Up until this moment in the salon where everybody discovered her when she played then, and then teachers in the community were looking to teach her. And that's when actually Perla understood that there's a little giant there, and she needs to be in the hands of maybe more of virtuosos to teach her. And so that's at least what we know from my grandfather's writing. And he mentions her in every page of his diary. She's actually the most talked about subject, and his greatest passion in the diary is to live for her to be known and become the artist that she needs to become, and for the world. That's his biggest dream. And he tells that all through the diary, that that's his biggest dream, and his main worry is for his daughter to be the artist that she needs to be in the world, and known for her music.
Right.
And she also wanted to be known. She wanted to be a woman, a female composer, not a female composer, but a composer. He talks about how it was important for her not to be counted as a female composer, but as a composer, not compared just to other females, but compared to composers in general, male or female, with no, she's good for a female.
Right.
Or stuff like that.
And
she was a feminist without knowing she was.
And you know how modern for her parents. Modern. And so, Steve, we'll come back to Gadya. Do you mind if we play just a snippet of one of Yosima's pieces, the Nocturne?
Very much.
Okay.
I'd like you to. Very much so.
Wonderful. And then Rina Yoli is Yosima's sister. And so Yoli, this is the concert you attended in Madison. So we'll get this up. And So that there was another piece after the Nocturno, but I would have to say the Nocturno is still my favorite piece. And so, anyway, we can. So that is just an example of what was in this notebook, and still is there, and that we're trying to with performing the Jewish Archive. Josima's music has been performed all over the world, and then going back to Eisenstadt, Steve, with Hagalia.
Yeah. Well, similarly, it was performed all over the world in our festivals. There were 5 main ones and lots of other performances as well. As Geraldine pointed out, they were in Madison, Wisconsin. There was one that was shared between Leeds and York in the UK, and in Prague and Terezin and Pilsen in the Czech Republic or Czechia, and then also in Sydney, Australia, where our colleague Joseph is based at the Conservatorium, and in South Africa, in Cape Town and Stellenbosch, where my research has been based and my contacts. So yeah, it's great to have propagated this music around the world, and people have taken it to heart, I think, and not just because it's the product of a 12, 13-year-old girl in the ghetto, though undoubtedly that has a great deal to do with it, but also because it has a sort of I don't know, a resonance of the time. Obviously she adored Chopin from listening to that, and one can only conjecture what greatness she would have achieved. So Eisenstadt, of course, was different. He was much older, and I mentioned that there were some other pieces that I kind of tracked down, that they weren't that hard to find, but for instance, in 1900 and then again in 1950, a collection of his music was published in Johannesburg by Cantor Israel Alter, who obviously was there at that time, and one of my interviewees in Cape Town, it may have been Philip Badash, Cantor Philip Badash, wonderful guy. He suggested that it was Eisenstadt's brother who made it out of Europe to South Africa and handed the materials to Israel Alter. I haven't been able to follow that up yet, but I need to look at some shipping records and things like that. So that has 3 or 4 pieces in it, including 4 or 5 pieces in it, including a really superb setting of Lecha Dodi. And here at this point, I should acknowledge the really excellent work of Cantor Mimi Schäfer from Berlin, who has recorded a CD called Ode to David Eisenstadt, which shows some of the pieces from this collection that was published in Johannesburg. But there are some others lying around, as it were. There is in a collection called Anthology of Hasidic Music from 1986. There's one piece, Adir Bi Melukha, by Eisenstadt. There's also a manuscript in the National Library of Israel of a Hasidische Kleine Rhapsodie by Eisenstadt, which I hadn't spotted before. And then there's the other 3 things are not compositions, but one is Eisenstadt was embarking upon an encyclopedia of Yiddish music when he was in the ghetto, and probably before as well. He didn't finish it, but Allgemeine Musiklexikon, erste jiddische populäre Musikenzyklopädie, is held in, I think it's the National Library in Warsaw. And so there is a part of that remaining. But then I hadn't come across these two, and I just somehow missed them. There's two LPs, it turns out, of a setting of Shir Hashirim Havdalah from 1927. Gesung, and the catalogue entry shows Gesungen von Oberkantor der Großen Warschauer Synagoge Gershon Sirota mit Orchester unter der Leitung Herrn Eisenstadt.
Yes.
So the sung by the cantor of the Warsaw Great Synagogue Gershon Sirota with the orchestra under the leadership of Eisenstadt. And also with Gershon Sirota's daughter, it's because it says daughter, Helena, and orchestra. So, and then there's another recording that it isn't dated, but this recording was taken from a live concert. In the editing, all applause and announcements have been eliminated. And again, it's Cantor Solomon Gisser this time, conducted by Professor Jacob Rosmarine, and it features pieces by Eisenstadt and but it's misspelled, so it's been tricky to track that one down. So a normal search doesn't do that. But that's Shama Vatismach Zion by Eisenstadt. So there are things that keep coming up. It's tantalizing sometimes. It's frustrating. The links to the National Library in Israel where you can listen to it, they don't work at the moment. So there's all sorts of things I need to chase and follow up, as there always is in research, but all in good time. Did you want to play a little bit of?
Yeah, shall I? I've got your website queued up. What would you like to share? There's the Kagajal.
Yeah, let's have just a little bit of that. So this is a website I put together just in December last year, and I'd been wanting to put it together for a little while, and it was the UK research assessment exercise at universities that kind of forced my arm to actually get on with it, which is great. It's called journeysinjewishchoralmusic.org, and you can visit it, and it takes the choral works that I have unearthed or researched over the course of performing the Jewish Archive project, and since then a little bit as well. And it presents them with their manuscripts in some cases, with the performance editions that I created from those manuscripts, and with various other artifacts like program notes and things that I put together, and also that from archival sources. And as you can see from Terry's sharing there, you can listen and watch. Some of the videos don't work at the moment. I need to fix that, but you can hear everything. And I guess the proudest moment was performing this at Wigmore Hall in a concert curated by the wonderful Shirley Gilbert, Music on the Brink of Destruction, in which music by Yosemite was also performed. And indeed, our wonderful colleague David Fligg, who is in the audience this evening, also himself performed there a narration to a melodrama by Gideon Klein that he had discovered, David had discovered in the archives in Prague. So maybe that's the one to play. It doesn't have any video, but
okay, let's listen.
Just a short amount of it.
Sure.
We're at Wigmore Hall now, and a concert that took place there in January this year. It was put together by Dr. Shirley Gilbert, who's an Associate Professor of History at Southampton University. The concert was called Music on the Brink of Destruction, and it featured music by composers living in the Terezin and Warsaw ghettos and in camps across occupied Europe in the 1930s and 40s. As she explained in her talk at Wigmore Hall, singing was the most widespread musical activity during the Holocaust. Thousands of new songs were composed during that time, sung both on stage by professionals and by people in the street and in soup kitchens and in the barracks. In a little while we're going to hear a selection of those songs, beginning with Anima Amin, I Believe, the observant song of the Jews, as it's known, with lyrics in Hebrew, affirming the belief in the coming of the Messiah. But that's after the music of David Eisenstadt, a leading light in Warsaw's Jewish musical world, whose daughter, by the way, was a singer known as the Ghetto Nightingale. This is a cantata by him, a setting of the Passover Seder song, Chad Gadya, One Little Goat. It's one of only a handful of scores by Eisenstadt that survives. It was found in an old folder in Cape Town in 2012, and this performance of it by the Clothworkers Consort of Leeds is conducted by the man who made the discovery, Stephen Muir.
So that's the first. Yeah. Could probably stop it there, Terry.
All right.
Thank you. So it's in 4 movements. It's quite a symphonic construction, and just looking at it analytically, it's got some sort of the germs of some really interesting, quite advanced techniques. So in the final movement, there's sort of motoric circular type figures, which are really quite similar to some of Stravinsky's techniques. And some of the harmonies are quite striking. That second movement, just for orchestra only, although we don't have the orchestra parts, so I just put it on string trio in that case. That Eisenstadt put a little note on the score there in Yiddish saying, this movement is it comes in the text where the slaughterer comes in, the shechita, Eisenstadt writes, this movement is to portray the fact that the Jewish slaughterer is a merciful slaughterer and not a vengeful, something like that. And then just after that, there's a really extraordinary passage for tenors and basses, which features lots of tritones depicting the evil angel of death who's come along to spoil things, and really, again, I mean, the use of the tritone to depict evil is a very Christian thing, in fact, but he's clearly drawing upon a rich history of music and considerable expertise and training from his time at the Odessa Conservatoire. So, yeah, I think he's a very fine composer.
Oh, that's wonderful. You know, it's Sharon had to leave, but she left a message in the chat that Reuben Feldshuh's second wife, Ruth, was also a singer and has her own incredible history, but also knew and sang with Maricia Eisenstadt. And so we have all these, we're constantly connecting and making these connections and realizing what an interwoven community this was at a particular level, right, in the Warsaw Ghetto. And so I wonder, and all of this activity was in such a compressed time span, right, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when was the establishment of the ghetto? Is it 19?
I have, I've got a kind of a set of key dates that I'll share.
Yeah.
And we can. So it was September 1st on the 1931 when the Nazi Germans invaded Poland. And then, 16 days later, then there was a Soviet invasion of Poland from the east. So Poland is caught in between these two monstrous powers. And then 10 days later, Warsaw, after being bombarded, surrenders to Nazi Germany. And just less than 2 weeks later, there is that official decree that establishes the ghetto. And so there it is. And it was interesting because I've gone through and looked at old calendars. If my reckoning is correct, October 12th, that official decree came out on a Saturday, Shabbat. And then the ghetto was sealed just over a month later, again on a Shabbat. And the selection of these dates were intentional. But then 9 days later, then we have the first concert of the Jewish Symphony Orchestra. And I at I'm not sure if that address on Tlomatsky is the Great Synagogue. I'm not sure. I'll have to look that up. But then, over 400,000 people imprisoned in the ghetto by January 1941. But within all of this is, this bubbling up of culture, of cabaret, of Eisenstadt, still working with the synagogue, still composing, working with the choirs there. And then Yosemite is being drawn into this cultural bubbling up, as I call it, and has, met these people that want to prepare her for the next level, for this incredible debut. And so that happens on March 15th, 1941. And then in July, it was Felicia Chernyakov who formed the Arts Patronage Committee. But then things, within just, 5 or 6 months, there's that huge decree by January of 42 where the ghetto is reduced to 300 hectares. And I did the math and comparison, is that's the size, that's smaller than New York City Central Park. And we've got 400,000 souls living in that space. And so by 1942, the symphony performances have been banned. And then the Grosse Action, the Great Deportation, begins on July 22nd. Now this, and then we have, at this point, I'm not sure, David, I'm sorry, Steve, do you know when the Eisenstadts were deported to Treblinka? Do you know?
It was, I do have the date, not off the top of my head. It was in 1942, certainly. And they didn't actually get as far as Treblinka, indeed. It was just, they were just murdered on the area, the gathering area.
Right.
Just one other very interesting thing from this list that you've got there, which I meant to say, was that Eisenstadt was instrumental, if you'll pardon the pun, in organizing the Jewish Symphony Orchestra in the ghetto. I think that he conducted it at times. And so it seems pretty likely that he would have at least encountered Yosemite. Well, I'm sure they must have encountered each other. But who knows? Do you know who conducted the debut in March the 15th, 1941, or is there not much information?
I believe, I'm going to stop share just a moment.
That's that poster, isn't it?
Yes, and I've got that. I'm sorry, I'll bring it back up. Yes, it was Adam Fermansky.
Yeah.
And let me bring that up. And then there's a really interesting photograph that Sharon, I think you turned me on to. And then I went into the Ringelblum archives online and got the provenance. So this is really fascinating. Get this back up for us. So here is the poster from Sharon's family and Yali's family of Yosemite. Now next this is a wedding reception in the ghetto, and the bride is a journalist, and I've got more of this in my notes, but you see where the red arrow is up on the left is a poster, and the top name is Adam, bottom name is Yosemite, and you can make out that's Mozart Symphony. And then, as I zoomed in on it, And this is a poster in someone's apartment in the Warsaw Ghetto at a wedding reception that of Yosemite Feldshuh's performance with the Jewish Symphony Orchestra. And it's phenomenal. And this is from the Ringelblum archives. And it indicates how well known she was, how highly regarded she was. And this is, as you can tell, this is the only posted material in this apartment. So that I find to be pretty phenomenal. Pretty phenomenal. There is, so it's really interesting. So Eisenstadt, Steve, could have been working with Yosemite in some type of capacity, or at listening, or at rehearsals, or this type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite likely,
See,
possibly. And if Yosemite's mother was a piano teacher, then the connections carry on. And getting back to Miriam Lichterman in
yes.
Cape Town, she's 96, I think. She's still going very strongly, I hope. And certainly last time I heard, she remembers, as I say, Eisenstadt, but she also remembers, her future husband, Cantor Lichterman, and she remembers, trying to think, her own piano teacher, which possibly was Eisenstadt's wife. Anyway, she remembers a lot of these connections, and
Mm-hmm.
It'd be very interesting to go back to her and ask her about Feldshuh. Although she encountered Feldshuh in Cape Town when we performed her music. So yeah.
Yeah, that would be phenomenal to try to trace this down. I remember, let's see, there was Sharon and Yeli, there was a wonderful part in your grandfather's diary rather, where he talks about the rehearsal of Yosemite with the symphony. And the symphony musician, here comes this little girl, and so the symphony members are patronizing, skeptical, and and Sharon, can you talk about how your grandfather described it, because it was just beautiful.
Okay, my English is not as good as his Hebrew, which is kind of like translating the Bible, but yes, it does describe incredibly well how the other musicians are sitting there and not taking this too seriously, just looking forward to seeing her screw up a little bit, as expected from a 11-year-old girl. And then she starts and they are mesmerized by the perception, the preciseness, and the attention. And she knew every note by heart.
Mm-hmm.
She knew exactly when to come in. She was precise and incredible, and they were just silenced and shocked and just in awe of her playing, as was later on the audience when she
right. And there is also, he writes about that Yosemite was practicing in the orphanage run by Janusz Korczak.
Yes.
And this was, and of course, music was very important, and the arts was very important.
Yes.
To Korczak as well. So can you tell us about that as well?
Well, my grandfather says that the reason was that Janusz Korczak's place had 2 pianos. Mm-hmm. So that allowed her to practice along with her teacher. And he talks a lot about how, you know, the relationship with the orphanages girls were there, and they loved her, and they would come and kiss her, and she would, every time she would come, she made a connection with them, and she brought them little presents. And he also mentions how affectionate Janusz Korczak was, up to the point where he felt a little something in his heart, like a pain in his heart, because it seemed like he was maybe more affectionate than my grandfather knew how to be. He mentions it as something very unique to the warmth that he had towards Yosima and the other kids. So this is a very special, to me, a very special chapter in the diary that talks about the rehearsing in Janusz Korczak's home.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there are all these, we're discovering more and more, connections, and how, this particular group of folks connected, they knew each other, and working and living together in such close quarters was just phenomenal. And people would give Yosima gifts, from what I understand, and Yosima would then take them with her to the orphanage and then gift them to the kids,
girls.
right?
Yes.
And some of this was food, and I mean, she needed this to perform, but at the same time, demonstrates the type of heart that she had.
Yes, I think my grandfather mentions that for the end of after the first concert, they all gathered and somehow got her a piece of chocolate.
Yeah, and
that was like the biggest prize possible for the concert that she gave.
Yeah, extraordinary. And I was working, and I'll share. I was working with. And thank you, Sharon, for sharing, these portions of the diary. I was working with them, with my dear colleague, Rachel Feldhay-Brenner, who is, she's been gone now 4 months. May her memory be for a blessing. But Rachel was just transfixed by the diary, because Rachel came from that part of the world. He was educated in the Tarbut system. And so she's a literary critic, and so
she's the one who helped you translate it.
Yes,
and I sent you the pieces.
Yes, and so she was just, quelling over, the education
Hebrew.
of, the Hebrew was it was Tarbut Hebrew, and so remarkable. So we are now at 7 after 12.
Are there people who want to ask you questions or make some comments? Would you like to do that, or have you got some more that you'd like to tell us about the whole project? Or
I don't think so. I mean, the project lives on in various guises. Its legacy, I guess. I mean, firstly, Terry's research there, my own research, faltered a little bit by ill health, but is hopefully coming back. And as we've mentioned, David Fligg is in the audience, who's written a fabulous biography of Gideon Klein. I've tried to read most of it in Hebrew, but I haven't got through all of it. But it's being translated, I believe, at some point, I hope. And then also Lisa Peschel carries on her research into theatre in the Terezin Ghetto. And who have I forgotten? Joseph in Sydney. I can't remember his surname, which is awful. Toltz, yeah. Sorry, I it's just a mental block suddenly. I've known him for years and years. And he carries on again in Sydney. So Yeah, and Simo Muir, of course, my namesake, who was the fabulous postdoctoral research fellow on the project. He then went on to the University of London to work on a project, quite a similar sort of project, but to do with the Roma community and music in the Roma community, and is still in London, commuting backwards and forwards between London and Helsinki, although perhaps not quite at the moment, but doing similar things. So yeah, the project has a legacy. It has a web legacy, of course. Terry shared my journeys in Jewish choral music, but there's a much bigger set in. Someone's just asked if they can have the link to the pages. I'll put that up in a minute. Oh, thank you, Terry. And then there's also a much bigger, more substantial website called Jewish Music and Theatre .org. Can't quite remember. I'll just check that, which has lots of far more artifacts than my little subset of it, and includes most of the performances from performing the Jewish archive. Let me just check. Yeah, jewishmusicandtheatre.org. I'll just copy that so that it's there for everybody to have. And that site it features some interesting curated collections. I mean, it's got hundreds and hundreds, thousands of artifacts and documents, texts, etc. on it. And David and I think Simo also, I need to check back, but have put together curated collections so that drawing upon the collection of all those documents to make a little bit more of a manageable narrative than sort of wandering through the archive, although that is quite interesting because it creates connections for you through the archive. And the final website I'll share with you is ptga.leeds.ac.uk. If you visit that one, that's the whole Performing the Jewish Archive project from start to finish, all the news posts. I mean, it's got a huge amount of information. But if you click on the link called Festivals, or there's also one multimedia, you can get to different ways. You see all, you can watch up to, I think it's 80 hours of video and recorded music on that site. There's quite a lot of repetition, of course, but there's also a lot of non-repetition. So feast your ears.
It was really an extraordinary project, and we, as the academic wing of the European Cantors Association, were really thrilled to be your first conference in 2015, where Steve hosted a conference which we called Magnified and Sanctified, the Music of Jewish Prayer. And that was extraordinary with 50 speakers, and that was what Alex is holding up. And that is where we first heard Steve performing this wonderful Chagadia with the cloth workers hall. Now something's making a lot of noise. I don't know whether it's actually Teryl. It's actually Teryl, because I've now muted you and the noise has stopped. So I don't know whether you've got an extraneous noise there. Anyway, let me just thank you both for bringing all this wonderful stuff to us and sharing again where we can find all the things that you've discovered. It's been lovely to meet the family. Sharon just looks so much like the child, the pianist. You know, you can almost like you got up from the piano and there you are. Do you play the piano as well?
Yes, I do.
You do? Well,
yes, I'm a musician as well.
You're carrying a very heavy legacy and a very special one.
I try to do my best to honor it.
Well, it's wonderful that you've been able to be with us. That Terrell's brought you on. So that's fantastic. Now, does anybody want to make any comments, ask any questions, say anything more? You're very welcome. Rachel.
Hi there, Stephen. It's so great to see you again. I'm like, I
And
feel
you,
like I haven't like seen you in ages, and it's fabulous to hear from Terrell. I got my master's degree from Wisconsin, so it's always nice to see the University of Wisconsin doing stuff. The question I have, I was thinking about this discussion about how Yosemite would have wanted to be remembered or evaluated as just sort of a composer among composers and not sort of among the allegedly inferior subset of just female composers. And I can understand that, and it seems to me that that hasn't happened to her, largely because she died, but she's sort of being, where it seems that she and a lot of other composers from this project are, and I hate to use this word, kind of still being re-ghettoized, that this music it is always performed and presented as, the music of the Holocaust, the music of the destroyed communities, the music of insert tragic descriptor here. And I'm wondering if it might ever be possible, or if there's some way that we as Jewish musicians or as people conversant in the musical community might find other ways to present this wonderful, glorious music. In the Nocturne, it's a beautiful piece of music. And if you didn't know this was written by an 11-year-old girl who was killed in the Holocaust, you would never know that. It's not tragic. Is there some way to bring this repertoire into the wider realm of music and maybe evaluate it separate from this sort of cloud over it? Or do you think that this music is always going to be set apart in some way? Because it seems a little bit unfair to sort of focus on these composers largely because of how they died.
Thanks, Rachel. Sharon, you wanted to come in, yeah? Yes, go on, Sharon.
Okay, I so agree with you, and I'm happy to actually say that for the first time I Google Yosemite every now and then, and about a month or 2 months ago I Googled Yosemite again, and I found out that she was performed in the program of this performance. She comes after Chopin. So she was played by an Israeli musician, pianist, who lives in the States. I don't remember right now in which. I think she's in Boston, and she's a faculty there. I think her name is Renana Gutman, but I may be forgetting the last name exactly. But and she played a concert in the Chopin Foundation. It was a Zoom concert during the Corona times, but in this concert, it has nothing to do with Holocaust. It's just a Chopin Foundation concert. And she discovered Yosemite all by herself through the Yad Vashem archive. And she decided to play 4 pieces of Yosemite's as part of her Chopin concert, which I was like, wow. I was so touched by it because he was her favorite composer, naturally, and you can hear that in her music. And so for me, that was like, I think that the highest that she got as far as I'm concerned. And so I think it should be more and more of these type of concerts. I agree with you that
How much
during Holocaust events.
How easily available is the score, for instance? If people were looking for it, how would they find it?
That's an issue right now. You are correct, because right now the only official score is the handwritten one that is available through the Yad Vashem archive or through me. And I actually did on my behalf about 15 years ago, when the music came to my attention, which, by the way, buried in Yad Vashem since my grandfather gave it to Yad Vashem upon starting the archive there, and nobody knew that it was there. None of us in the family knew it was there until somebody dropped me a line about 15 years ago and told me that it's there. And then I did contracted with a musician, actually Itamar Argov, which is the son of Argov, and he transcribed it like in Sibelius, like digitally, so it will be able to be read by other musicians, but it still has errors and it hasn't been published. And I'm if you can help somebody to publish her music in a decent way, that would definitely be a start.
Yeah, so there's definitely need for, a very clean publication, like a definitive publication of it.
I think there's I've been having quite a lot of discussion with Martin Anderson at Toccata recently. Firstly, he's issuing the CDs I'm doing on Hans Gaal, but he's also hoping to move into sheet music publication, and of a very sort of scholarly nature, I guess, as you would expect of Martin. So his editions would be in the realm of a critical edition, rather than just a sort of sheet music that sells for a couple of quid on Music Room. So that might be an avenue. Certainly, I'm in touch with him to publish a lot of the pieces that are on my Journeys in Jewish Music site, and got all the permissions in place, which is good. And so I'll keep you up to date with that, everybody.
Okay, and that's Toccata Classics. You could look them up.
Yeah,
but
and Toccata.
This is a critical element, and it's the first thing that needs to be done before the music can be performed. Agnes, you wanted to say something.
Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
This was a lovely, lovely, lovely event. Thank you. I've got two questions. One is that, does anybody know why the Jewish Symphony Orchestra in the Ghetto was banned in 1942? That's one question. And the other one is, I probably lost the plot a little bit. I can see that Sharon looks a little bit like Josima, but I just would like to know, so what is the family relation there?
She was my aunt. So her father, yes, her father was my grandfather.
Okay, thank you.
Regarding the Jewish Symphony Orchestra, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, presumably it's part of the liquidation and everything, but why specifically the Jewish Symphony Orchestra was banned, I'm not sure. So
the reason why I'm wondering, because it's 1942, and it's long before other activities. I mean, in Hungary it was 1944 that they banned similar things, and then in Terezin they never ever banned them. They just gradually took them off. So it would be interesting to know what was the official reason for banning. But okay, fair enough. So thank you very much indeed.
Something to discover.
Right. Yes. I think I've got to go back into my sources and see what was going on at that time. But
thank you very
much. Great question.
Alex, thank you, Agnes. Alex, you wanted to say something? Unmute.
Yeah, I understood that Jewish artists were still recording in the 1930s, 1940s. So if they were recording, they had to have musicians play for them. So it doesn't seem correct that an orchestra was banned, but there were still being records produced. I mean, Sirota was still recording, and other cantors, Eisenstadt was still conducting, and there was various concerts that came out of Warsaw in the 1930s, 1940s. So I find it very, very difficult to comprehend. So is that an actual fact, or are you presuming?
Well, Alex, you saw that the Warsaw was surrendered,
destroyed in 43. Yeah.
So it was obviously under severe occupation. So.
Well, 1943, I know it was virtually destroyed, because that was during Passover, when Gershon Sirota and his family were murdered, having come back from America to as a promise that he would, for Passover, be in Warsaw. So he promised, and he didn't want to break his promise because he came from America. So if he wouldn't have come back, it wouldn't have happened. So he was murdered, I think it was the 7th or 8th day of Passover in the Warsaw Ghetto. So that we know is a fact.
That's interesting. Something interesting to follow through.
But I would love to perform this if we have another conference, which I think we've been talking about with Geraldine. It would be a nice idea to have this music and perform it, because it's beautiful, and it should be heard, and it should be known. What do you think, Geraldine?
It's been a long time that, for instance, composers like Korngold are now just being performed in a normal way, but it's taken years and years of careful work by people like Brendan Carroll and Michael Haas and all these people to slowly bring this music back into circulation. And, they keep doing it, and every little step is another step along the way. As Alex was saying, we're looking to do version 3, Mark 3 of Magnified and Sanctified. We do it like every 4 years. We did it in 2019 in Hanover. And so 2023 is the optimum date. It could be part of a big conference called Migration and Transformation in Jewish Music.
Terrific.
It could be anywhere. We're up for grabs. So anybody who wants to say, I'd like to host it, you'll be seriously considered. And we're looking, trying to keep people connected. So in thanking Steve, it's really lovely to have you with us again and to bring up all this.
Great to be here. Thank you.
You've done. Teryl, thanks so much for bringing Steve and for enlightening us and in illuminating us with all this lovely music. Next week, I'm delighted to say that at last Isabel Gans and Shoshana Shachak are going to talk about Judeo-Spanish music. This has been delayed from February, when poor Isabel was frozen solid in Texas in that terrible storm. So we've had to reschedule it, and it's going to be next week. And we're really looking forward to it. She's looking at, if you're there, Isabel, if you want to say something, you're welcome. Unmute.
I'm here.
Good. Tell us something about next week.
Well, we're going to compare Shoshana Shachak's, whose professional name is Susanna, her field recordings, which she has thousands of them, because she recorded native singers in Israel from various countries, mostly Turkey, Greece, etc. And we're going to show how professional ensembles take this raw material and create arrangements which make them attractive to Western audiences, as well as take into account where the song originated and what the performance style of that country was.
That sounds fascinating. We're really looking forward to it. Isabel. And as I said, I'll try to be there depending on my Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
But everybody else will certainly enjoy that. Thank you. The week after, we're delighted to have Benny Meisner. Benjamin Meisner is now the emeritus cantor from Holy Blossom Synagogue in Toronto. And Benny's uncle was Israel Alter. So as Alex mentioned to you, Steve, he could be a connection to Israel Alter, to Eisenstadt, and to all these people, and he's very much, knows everything, and he's got a huge archive himself, which is going to go to Israel. So he'll
Fabulous.
be on the week after that, on the 8th of June. Now, the week after that, not on the Tuesday, but on the Monday, we're doing a program where we're connecting groups. In other words, not just individual scholars. Hang on, somebody's making a noise. So we're connecting groups. In other words, Alan Byrne is going to talk to us about Yiddish Summer Weimar, and Gila Shamili is going to talk about the Moscow State Center, where she's just done a conference on Jewish music in Moscow. We're going to hear from Alex Knapp about the International Ernst Bloch Society. And there are a couple of other speakers. So we're connecting not only individual scholars and archivists and things, but actually people who run organizations can also be. So I will inform everybody of what's going on. If you want to be informed, you need to join the Jewish Music Group, please, at Humanities Commons. I don't know, Teryl, if you are good at being able to snap that onto the chat. Do you have the Humanities Commons website? Because that's the surest way of being informed about all the things that are happening. We're always really happy to have you join along. And I'd also like to say, Alex, maybe you'd like to just say something about tomorrow's Voice of the Cantor, where they're talking about Nusach. Does Nusach really matter? Alex.
Thank you, Geraldine. And this is part one of a two-part program on Nusach, where the first program is from cantors and rabbis in the UK, and part two will be from our brothers and sisters in the United States, from the Cantors Assembly. People mix Nusach with minhag, with custom, and they tend to say this tune is Nusach, but it isn't. It's become a custom, and we have to understand why is it. Do we continue with the Nusach? Are the services, can services be held without it? Or is it passé and old-fashioned? And we have to move on and try and find a happy, clappy version or another version that we can continue with the services. We have a wonderful panel of Asher Heinovitz, who's the cantor at the Yeshurun in Jerusalem. We have, excuse me, I can't think of the other names.
Hello, who's actually sitting here listening to us.
Oh, Charles, of course. Charles, who's an absolute doyen of Nusach and specialist in that subject. And we've got Benji Rickman, who's the young rabbi at Holy Law Synagogue. And can't think of the others. Jeffrey Sissler, of course. Yeah. See, I've got Senior Citizens Block. So okay. It's, we have Jeffrey Sissler, who's Chazan rabbi and teacher of Nusach. So it should be very, very interesting. It's 7 p.m. UK time tomorrow, and you'll find all the information and the contacts on the ECA website, Zoom.
Which is www.cantors.eu. Cantors.eu. So that's that. So Thank you.
Did you say, Alex, that you have senior citizens block? Sorry.
No, the other Alex has got that. Yeah. Thank you. So once more, thanks so much to Steve and Teryl for a magnificent presentation. Really wonderful to hear this music and to hear about it. And thank you everybody for coming, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Jess wants to say something before you go. He's got his hand raised.
Clapping. That's the clapping emoji.
That's a clapping. That's a clapping. Thank you, Jess.
Sorry, I apologize.
The blue hand is, but it is confusing. The blue hand is say, I want to ask a question, and the yellow hand is to say thank you. So let me put up yellow hands and say thank you, and look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you
so much. Take care, and hope you can join us tomorrow.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
What? Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, David.
Bye, David.
Bye, David. Bye, Terry. Bye,
Bye, Marion. Good
Bye,
to see you,
Marion.
Bye.
Just quickly, it's so good to see you, Steve. It's
yeah, it's good to see you.
I've been looking forward to this for a while when it's been penned in, and
thank you, thank you.
We've missed you, and it'd be lovely if we could maybe collaborate again. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, if the possibility of doing Leeds again, maybe for a conference.
Yes, when Geraldine mentioned the conference, my cogs started turning. I need to. So that's 23, yeah. 2023.
Yeah.
So it was a good long planning time. That's great. Do you want me to put some very sort of vague feelers out?
Yeah, please do, because maybe we can marry that up with Albie and do a convey or something at the same time within that, similar to what we did last time.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that would be brilliant, and maybe it'll fit in if we do it under the umbrella. Can you hear me, by the way? Am I still?
Yeah.
I've disappeared somehow. Because no, I haven't.
Not to us. Not to us.
So if we took this, obviously the magnified and sanctified would be an important thing, but if we took this migration and transformation, that would fit in with your things, and maybe some of the results of your research could be part of that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would sort of be a culmination of that.
And I think
Mark also has a talk on migration in a different way to do with the United States. Remember the maps and the various other things that when he presented. But yeah, it's so
a very
important.
rich, subject, and I think it would garner interest from a huge range of disciplines and areas in music potentially. Just say the title of it again.
Migration and transformation.
Transformation
in Jewish music.
Yeah.
It can be tweaked if necessary.
That's pretty good.
The idea of an umbrella, an overarching.
Matt Austerklein does a brilliant talk on Italian migration of Jewish Italian music, and we're not talking about Salomon Rossi. We're talking way before that time, and it's not Sephardi music. It's that more Ashkenazi music came in before the Sephardi, and it was quite widespread. And then we have China, and then we have Japan, and it can go on and on. It's a tremendous subject.
Oh yeah, and it's a very popular one with scholars. And if one pitches it right, then whilst it's called migration and transformation in Jewish music, if you pitch it right, it can also have other areas of musicology and other ethnomusicology which impinge upon Jewish music.
Yeah, or you could call it, migration, transformation in music.
Could do.
Well, it's also geographic location also plays a big part in it, because what is Jewish music, and what is music, led to by, it's another ball game. So geography and where people live played a huge part in in music. Yeah.
I'm going to have to go because I've just been informed by my lovely daughter that dinner is ready.
Oh, wonderful.
Every week she does she's going to university in October, but so this is a year out for her. And every week she does cuisine from a different country.
Fantastic.
So,
enjoy.
I can't remember what we are tonight.
Transformation in dinner.
Absolutely, yeah. So I better pop off. But yeah, let's think about that, and I'll get the cogs going.
Thank you so much, and stay well, Steve.
I hope to.
And stay in touch as well. It's important.
I shall. Yeah. Thanks so much for both of you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.